It's often the case, you know, that the book they try to ban goes to the top of the bestsellers list. So it was for me with an American comedian called Dave Chappelle. I might be embarrassing myself by telling you that I had literally never heard of Dave Chappelle. Apparently, he's been the king of Netflix and stand-up comedy for years in the United States, but I had never heard of him. Now, I'm an absolute expert on his whole oeuvre. I've watched everything that Dave Chappelle has ever done. Why so? Because they tried to ban him. They tried to cancel him. People walked out of Netflix because of a show that he had given, which actually plainly they hadn't properly watched, because if they had, they would have found their criticism rather off the mark. But Dave Chappelle is now one of my heroes, at least in the comedy field. Another is my first guest today, who's also felt the hot breath of the cancel brigade. He's the Scottish comedian Leo Kearse, and he joins me now from beautiful Galloway Bay. Leo, they might as well be chasing moonbeams trying to cancel and censor you. But what was it all about with Dave Chappelle?
Well, with Dave Chappelle, he's been criticised for sort of being having quite a gender critical stance on trans ideology, and ironically, his latest show, The Closer, which unleashed all this furore, it deals with his friendship with a transgender comedian. And interestingly, I don't want to give away any spoilers in the show, but all the people who are criticising Dave Chappelle and saying that his words, his criticism of transgender ideology, which isn't, he's not saying, he doesn't come out and say anything transphobic. He's not saying, you know, transgender people are bad or, you know, anything. He's just questioning the authentic, you know, he's just questioning the ideology which says, you know, transgender women are women, and that's full stop, and there's no difference, no biological difference, no difference in any way. So, I mean, he does a lot of comedy about that, but the actual emotional heart of the show is about his friendship with this transgender comedian. And ironically, for all the people saying that Dave Chappelle's words and comedy cause harm, she spoke in defense. She tweeted in defense of Dave Chappelle because she's been a friend of Dave Chappelle's for a while. She opened for him at some of his shows. So she tweeted in defense, and obviously the tribe hate it when you know, one of their own turns against them. So the trans rights activists actually hounded her and tweeted abuse at her. And 6 days after she tweeted in defense of Dave Chappelle, she very, very sadly killed herself. So that's the sort of the heart of the show is about his friendship with this transgender woman who killed herself. And for all the people, you know, talking about harm and real world, you know, words being violence in the real world, I should imagine the abuse that this transgender woman got from her own community was, I mean, that's the actual harm. That's, you know, I can't imagine it helped her, and it definitely, you know, plausibly contributed to her suicide.
Not only is all of that that you said about Dave's relationship with a transgender person, but when she killed herself, Dave Chappelle then set up various arrangements to take care of her child. So it seems ill-judged in the extreme, this hostility against him. But yeah, you were there at Hammersmith. He's just finished his London series. Were there protesters there, and what kind of people were they? What were they complaining about?
I didn't see any protesters myself. I mean, he did quite a few nights. I think he did around about 8 nights at Hammersmith Apollo. I was lucky enough to get free tickets because I've been cancelled for transphobia as well. So so Chappelle's team reached out to me to offer me free tickets, which was fantastic. But I didn't see any protests outside. And the atmosphere inside was highly celebratory, and there's a lot of love in the room. There was nobody, nobody shouted abuse, nobody walked out. And I think, I don't know, with comedy, I never understand why people protest against comedy, because it's performed in front of a jury of people. You've got the audience in front of you. And if you say anything that's genuinely transphobic or racist or misogynist or horrible, then, people generally won't like that. They're not going to laugh at it. They're gonna vote with their feet and walk out.
J.K. Rowling is in the news again. Oxfam have withdrawn something from sale in their charity shop that was raising money for their work because of complaints from what they said were their transgender staff. But a comedian is of a different order. The whole role of the jester, the court jester, was to, as it were, reflect the zeitgeist, to comment on the zeitgeist. If a comedian can't be allowed to make jokes about anything, we really are up a gum tree, no?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Howard Jacobson, states that the role of the comedian is almost like a modern day philosopher. It's where ideas go to be discussed, and you've got this freedom of expression in comedy that you don't necessarily have in other art forms, because you're making jokes, so it's not meant to be. It's not a statement of objective absolute truth. It's you're playing with ideas and taking extreme positions and you're adding hyperbole. I don't know. I've suddenly forgotten how to speak. But so this is where society discusses ideas. So on the one hand, comedians can be incredibly facile and lighthearted, but on the other hand, we're discussing ideas for society.
Yes. How far has it gone in terms of British comedians? Dave Chappelle, Netflix, that's one kind of milieu. What's it like on the stage where you are now in Galway? What's it like in Glasgow? Are we drifting onto dangerous shores?
People are definitely more ready and willing to complain about things and protest and even heckle. I mean, my friend Nico Yearwood, he was heckled. He was heckled recently, doing a piece of material about how attitudes to gay people have changed and how it's good that they've changed, but somebody misunderstood. And again, there's the assumption of bad faith, and they heckled, saying he was being homophobic. And obviously, the audience were completely behind Nico, and they turned on the person who heckled. But I have noticed that people are more ready to complain, and I'm seeing it with I'm digging with Steve Hughes at the moment, who's he's been doing stand up for 27 years. He's a master of the craft. He did the Apollo, Michael McIntyre's Roadshow, and now he's getting tour dates pulled because people are complaining that he said something sexist, and I think it's having this deadening effect on comedy. People are less likely to take risks and say something that's fun and it strays near the edge. And for me, all the fun in comedy happens near the borderline of acceptability.
I've never quite understood the demand to cancel. After all, there's plenty of things on Netflix, too many. If you don't want to watch Dave Chappelle, you can switch over or go outside and do something useful. Instead, if you don't want to hear Leo Kearse, don't buy a ticket for his show. If you bought it inadvertently or been given it and went unknowingly into the arena where Leo Kearse is performing, shout out, get up and walk out. But where comes the impulse to close people down? That's what I don't quite get.
Yeah, it's and to people say, oh, Dave Chappelle, he's punching down, he's an oppressor. Honestly, if you've got the power to complain and get a comedian cancelled and silence a person, then you're the oppressor. You're the person with the power. So people say comedians punch down or punch up or whatever. Woke ideology systemic wokeness is through, its tendrils are through all of society, all through academia, tech, through the legislature, through government. So when we're questioning woke ideology, we are punching up. And for people to say that, you know, anybody discussing transgender issues is punching down, that's a ridiculous precept that's assuming that transgender women are you know, beneath everyone else, which they clearly aren't. You know what I mean? And it silences, it tends to silence the exact people that they should be uplifting. So I dated a transgender woman. I wrote material with her. I performed it. People complained that the material was transphobic because they saw me performing it, so they didn't know that it was written with a transgender woman. So I was cancelled from a comedy festival in Australia for transphobia. And ironically, the people cancelling me silenced a transgender voice. So they were doing the opposite of what they claimed to be doing. They were silencing a marginalized transgender voice.
Who'd have thought that have gone woke down under? Dave Chappelle is a black man. He's a Muslim man, not two categories that you would normally find attacked as an oppressor. Is he going to survive this onslaught?
Oh yeah, Dave Chappelle will survive and thrive. I mean, I think the impact on him is more personal rather than financial. You know, he doesn't like the. He was saying when I saw him at the Apollo, he was saying he doesn't like the sort of opprobrium and just the sort of the bad feeling that he sees when he goes on social media directed towards him, often by people who haven't actually seen the show, or they've watched it and misunderstood it or taken things out of context. But I mean, financially and career-wise, Dave Chappelle is too big to cancel. The comedians I'm worried about are the smaller ones like me. So we can very easily be cancelled, and nobody's going to notice us. There's not going to be any front page headlines or televised walkouts or anything. We'll just be gone from the ledgers.
Well, you've just orbited the world on board the Sputnik, and I'm very glad that you did. Leo Kearse, enjoy the rest of your time in Galway.
Thanks, George.